Today, we went in, we got a little work done in the stadium, and Jonathan, Nick, and Jeremy all took reps, and it was a good day.
What did you guys work on, particularly offensively today?
We kind of worked on some situations. We worked on some blitz pickup situations with the defense, probably even more so than we would in a normal practice. We really focused on blitz situations, and then did some pass scale, some 7-on-7 stuff. And then we put the ball down and we let either our younger guys or maybe some of the guys that we just still needed to get more information on play a little bit, much shorter than our first two scrimmages have been. And we held a lot of the older guys or guys that we kind of feel like we already have all the info on them and know what they can do. We held those guys out. So it was by no means a full scrimmage compared to the first two.
How different does the offense look under Jeremy Johnson as opposed to Nick Marshall?
Right now, it all looks pretty much the same. You know, we're running the same plays with all three of the guys that we're still rotating in there, and each one of those three guys probably does things a little bit different. I would say, you know, right now, I don't think there's any part of the offense that we could or could not run with either Jeremy or Nick over the other. I think they both could do the same, you know, could fulfill the same role for us as far as running the offense.
There's a rumor going around that Nick Marshall can throw the ball 80 yards in the air. As an offensive coordinator, does that kind of make you salivate a little bit?
Well, I think that would make our offensive line coach nervous. I mean, if he feels like he's got to protect long enough for us to throw it 80 yards, we've got some work to do up front. But I haven't seen it yet. You know, I know that the guys, that really all three of those guys can still throw the ball deep. They got strong arms. So a big part of what we do is trying to stretch the field vertically, so that's a big plus.
How's Nick been doing as far as protecting the ball? He had all those turnovers last season, fumbling, and also the interception.
For the most part, all the guys have done a pretty good job. Nick's done well. You know, I think he's been very conscious of it. You know, we only had him live for that one scrimmage. I don't think we had any turnover issues there with him. And then, of course, in the other scrimmages and team situations, you got the orange jersey on, so you're not being hit as much, but we haven't thrown a lot of interceptions either, which has been positive.
You guys work on that pretty early in practice. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, really across the board on offense, every position, we work on ball security every day. We have these ball bands we do and things to try to, one, they're functional and they have a purpose actually fundamentally, but two, it's just to keep it constantly on their minds. We're always stressing it. And then there's some things I do with the quarterbacks, you know, to always make sure they got two hands on the ball in the pocket. You know, that's what really is a quarterback, aside from throwing an interception or if you were running. You know, you're in the pocket and things start breaking down and you have to flush and scramble. A lot of times you drop it to one hand and that's when any D lineman can rip it out. And so it takes discipline to be able to move, especially for athletic guys, move and keep both hands on it at all times. So that's something we work every day.
Is there anything on film you saw with Nick last year, just the way he carried the ball, running it, that was careless at times?
No, I think a big part of the ball security at any position, but at quarterback is all just about attention to detail. And you've got to discipline yourself to make that a habit. It's not something you can just think about every now and then. You got to make it a habit, and that's why we drill it every day. And that's why we have accountabilities. When we're watching film, if I see them with one hand on the ball, we're going to do accountabilities for that the next day to keep it in their head that it's got to become something that they don't think about. And I've been really pleased with all those guys, but him, you asked about specifically with the way he's been coachable to do that.
I realize quarterback's such a different position, but does it help Nick that he's played in the SEC before, that he's played in huge games and situations like that, or?
I don't know yet. I would think it'd be good that he's an older guy. When you come from junior college, you know, he's played in this league for a year, so he understands that. And you're also 2 years older than your average young man coming out of high school. So there's just from natural maturity level that should exist. And while junior college is not the SEC, it's maybe a step up from speed from a lot of high schools. So having a year in that can't hurt.
Rep, with similar capabilities from both Nick and Jeremy and similar reps thus far, what do either one of them have to do? What questions do you need answered this week that they haven't answered for you already?
Yeah. Well, really, we still got three guys we're looking at. We feel very confident. We know what Jonathan can do at this point from the spring and from the first 2 weeks of fall camp. And so we were honest with him and those guys that, you know, we're going to let the two new guys who don't have the same amount of reps. They don't have as many, and we haven't been able to evaluate them as much. We're going to let them get more of the reps this week instead of splitting it three, whereas we were doing 4 ways. And I think it just always goes back to who's going to earn the respect of their teammates. You know, who's the team believe in? Who's the offense believe in? Who's going to protect the ball? And who do we feel like we can trust that even if it's a simple game plan or a big game plan, that they're going to be able to execute what we ask them to do. and play within the system.
Gus had mentioned this week several times, you've alluded to this week. Is the plan to make a decision at the end of this week?
We don't have a day, but the quicker you can decide, then the quicker you can move on to preparing for your opponent, and you can prepare for maybe getting that continuity together. And we feel like we had 4 for a good while. We're now at 3. And I'll say this, guys, about Kyle Frazier. I mean, you talk about a young man who loves Auburn. I don't know if I've ever been more proud of a young person I've coached than I am of Kyle right now. Because when you look at it at the quarterback position, I tell those guys all the time, I mean, it's unfair, but it's reality. When you win, you get way too much credit, and when you lose, you get way too much blame. He went through some stuff that not a lot of people go through, and I couldn't be more proud of last spring, and especially this summer and fall camp, the way he responded to those scenarios. And then at the end of the day, he just came to us and said, hey, I want to help this team win. He said it was more important to him that Auburn get back to where he wants Auburn to be when he came here. And, I think that was a pretty selfless act, but I want to make sure I said that. But no, when you get to 3 guys and 2 guys, you start to kind of narrow down those reps. And it's not just at quarterback, it's at every position right now.
Rhett, is it going to be, in the back of your mind, if Jeremy separates himself, maybe, are you nervous a little bit about the possibility of playing a true freshman quarterback in the SEC, or has that even gone through your mind, and do you think he can handle it if that's
Well, I think anytime you play a guy that is either a true freshman or a guy who doesn't have any of that experience, you're always going to be a little anxious, I'll say, to see how they respond, because it's one thing to do it in a live scrimmage situation that's controlled, or in a practice where they got an orange jersey on. When you put 90,000 people in the stands, how are they going to respond? Because good things are going to happen, but bad things are going to happen. And so that's one thing you're also looking for, when you decide who am I going to go with. It's who do I think that when it's really good, they're going to be the same, and when things get really tough, they're going to be even keeled. They're not going to be rattled. And I think a lot of it, our job is to put someone in there that's ready. I mean, in fairness to whoever that becomes, we got to feel like we're doing right by them, and that we feel like they're ready to handle that.
Have the quarterbacks responded to pace and tempo so far?
Very well. And, early on for Nick and Jeremy, that's half the battle. Jonathan and Kyle have been used to it from the spring and from the summer. That's half the battle, getting used to the way we do things at that tempo. So not only are you asking them to learn a new system and learn reads, but you're asking them to do it at warp speed. But they picked it up well. As a matter of fact, I'd say the last 5 or 6 practices, 7 practices, I don't think we've had issues with communication or anything like that or tempo. You'd have to go way back for me to even remember that issue being an issue. I think it's more now about the execution and the final details.
Right, are you starting to see separation at wide receiver? Because that seemed to be a group that had a lot of competition and no one had really stepped themselves apart.
Yeah, I think that's another position. We're starting to see guys separate themselves. We're getting a feel for the guys that we know we can trust and count on, and they're going to be where they're supposed to be. They're going to play without the ball. They're going to make plays when we need someone to make plays. So there's no doubt we've seen separation there as among other positions.
Is Tony Stevens a guy who can get in there? We heard he had a hamstring issue, was out the other day.
Yeah, Tony's a guy we just got to get more out of and see more. And, he has had something kind of holding him back a little bit. So the jury's still out on him. We do feel good about him moving forward in the future. We feel like he's exactly what we thought he was when we recruited him. But in fairness to him, he's going to need more reps between now and then for us to know for sure.
Coach Grimes talked about how he seems pretty comfortable with 4 spots on the line. You talk about right tackle, how that's shaking out. It looks like a 2 or maybe 3-man battle.
Yeah, and that's one of those deals that we're not necessarily set on what we're going to do yet, but it's not for lack of options. We feel like Avery, Sean, Pat Miller, all those guys, pretty good players. And not only do you look at who's going to be the best at that right tackle spot, but how does it work shuffling everything else from backup guards to centers to left tackle, all those things will play into that decision. And all 3 of those guys have really come along and gotten much better, so it's just going to be a matter of who wins that job will also alter kind of how we go in with our top 6, 7, 8 linemen going into a game.
What are you hoping to see out of Jonathan this week, since he won't be working with the first team?
Yeah. Jonathan, he's a winner, man. I mean, he responded right now just like I thought he would. And he understands it. And he's always ready, and when he does get reps, like he got some reps today, he's ready to take advantage of it. So, and he's done what you'd want an older guy to do. I mean, he's been encouraging. He's been a perfect team player, and I know that he's ready, and we'll start to maybe adjust those reps accordingly throughout the week as we need to. But we just told him going into this week, we feel like we got a pretty good grasp on what your strengths are, what you can do. You're not out of it. You're going to get still plenty of reps, and just hang in there for the next couple days. These two guys are going to get the bulk of the reps. We got to see how they respond. How do they respond ones-on-ones? How do they respond when good things happen, bad things happen? When they get more reps, do they continue to get better? Do they stay the same and plateau out? Those are all things we got to see, and you just can't see it if you're rotating 3 or 4 guys.
Rhett, Reese is clearly the starting center, but in the spring and even back to last season, Tunde certainly had a lot of difficulty with shotgun snaps. Has that improved thus far in fall camp?
It has, and Tunde's a versatile guy too. He's a guy that could maybe get in the mix at other spots on the line too in a reserve role. But I do feel like we've got 3 or 4 guys that can snap the football behind Reese. Certainly Reese is kind of the leader and the anchor of that unit, so we got to be very cautious with him, and he's very important to us. But if something wants to happen, we feel like we got several options, Tunde being one of them.
Rhett, any other freshmen besides Jeremy Johnson sort of making a push to be in the 2 deep, to play in rotation?
Yeah, some guys that have really stood out. I think Marcus Davis has really stood out, young wideout in a slot role. You can tell that playing quarterback in high school helped him. Game doesn't move too fast. He's got the great attitude. He's what we wanted. He's what we thought, and so he'll be pushing to get in the mix. I think a guy like Jonathan Ford has done some good things. Now with our back situation, how many you can play may play into that. A lot of the two will play in the special teams. What guys maybe will factor in on special teams, but those, you alluded to Jeremy, and then I'd say Rudy, called Jonathan Ford Rudy, and Marcus have really kind of shown the ability to kind of stay calm in those big moments.
Is Jonathan working at the 4 mostly?
Yeah, he works at the running back spot, yeah.
Coach, I know you weren't here last year, but not a whole lot of explosive big plays on the offense. With athletes like Jeremy Johnson and Nick Marshall, do you see some big play potential for this offense this year?
I think so, and that's one of our goals in every game. We want explosive plays, and that's the first scrimmage this year when we had the quarterbacks go live. We had a couple, but by no means to our standard. The second scrimmage, we did have, that was the biggest positive. I thought we had explosive plays. We made explosive plays in the pass game. We had a lot of explosive plays in the run game. So I think there's no question that we have athletes. We just got to make sure we get in the right spot and give them those chances to make those plays. But there's no doubt it's too hard in any league, especially the SEC, to drive 80 yards, just dinking it down the field. You've got to have explosive plays if you want to score points.
How much faster will this offense go than the first time you and Gus were here?
No, I really can't answer that just because we have one tempo. We're going to go as fast as we can. There are times that we'll slow it down like anybody would, or check and do things. And that'll be a game plan by game plan basis. But I do know this. We want our guys to play extremely fast all the time. They know one speed. The only time they slow down is if we slow them down. And that's the way it's been since I played for Coach. We're going to play fast.
And in practice, it's just
and our whole philosophy is we want to make practice almost unrealistic, harder in the game, faster than game. We want quarterbacks, wideouts, line. People are thinking. They're having to make decisions quicker than they would in a game, and they're more tired than they ever will be in a game. And so those games and these scrimmages, I told our offense the other day, you run scrimmage, and we're going right back on the field because we're playing ourselves. Normally in a game, you run 6, 8, 10 plays. You go sit on the bench while the special teams defense play for a little bit. You catch your breath. So that's our philosophy. Make it extremely hard. Sometimes it's unrealistic, but on game day it'll slow down.
Do you give them like a play clock target or anything in practice?
We used to back before when they would spot the ball and they would just run the 25-second clock on the whistle.
Right.
We'd always try to have it snapped in the first 5 seconds. Now with it just goes right to a 40-second clock, takes off running. There's not necessarily a target other than when that official moves away from the football, we want to be ready to snap the ball.
Rhett, sorry to ask you a defensive question, but to your knowledge, is D Ford healthy right now?
Coach Malzahn handles those kind of questions.
I wanted to ask you about Ford. What element does he bring to the offense?
Who?
Jonathan Ford,
Jonathan
Rudy.
Rudy. Him and Corey Grant bring a lot of the same thing. They're really fast guys. Corey's bigger. He's a junior. He's been in college longer, and so I think Rudy's one of those guys that when he gains pounds, 10, 12 pounds over the next year or two, it'll really help him, but he can really run. And like I said, more than anything, you can just see there's no fear. I know he's doing a lot of good things in other places. And by no means am I saying that he's in the too deep or anything. I'm just saying he's someone, when you ask me, who stood out. Him and really, I'll be honest with you, Peyton Barber, like today, got a lot of carries and he was really tough. And he's going to be really good too.
Could Kyle play receiver in the future?
He in the future, I don't know. Could he physically? You bet. It was one of those deals with Kyle. You know, I think he felt comfortable at that spot. He also knew that helped our team right now. And I'm just telling you, when you have a young man step up and say, I want to win games. I'd love to be this, I want to win games. Put me here, I'll do whatever it takes to win. And I think his exact words to me were, I love my teammates and I love Auburn. I'm close to these guys, I'm going to be I love these guys, I'm not going anywhere, I want to win. And, you know, shoot, he had a lot of Division I offers coming out of high school at that position. So, I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete. And and I think being a quarterback will help him pick things up pretty quick, I would think.